Well, turning to New South Wales politics, it has been an enormous week with the revelations that Premier Gladys Berejiklian was in a close personal relationship with former disgraced MP Daryl Maguire. Among the more salacious details of this story was the quite concerning evidence that arose during the ICAC hearings that Maguire had discussed business dealings with the Premier and even the money he stood to make. Despite acknowledging the relationship was a great personal stuff-up, the Premier is resisting calls to resign, and at this stage her party is backing her. But there are growing calls from both crossbench MPs and the New South Wales Opposition for her resignation, or at least for her to stand down while the ICAC investigation is ongoing. Joining me now is Leader of the New South Wales Opposition, Jodi McKay. Thank you so much, and I apologise you had to wait just then. Look, I want to start with the Premier's excuse that she's given publicly for her for this week for the ICAC inquiry. She has said this has been a grave personal mistake, a deep mistake in her personal life, but there's been no wrongdoing and it has not affected her professional conduct. Do you think this is a legitimate reason?
No, I mean, the term she used, you're right. I mean, I think she said it was a stuff-up. I don't accept that. Can I say that there are two issues here for me? One is her personal relationship, and her personal relationship is her personal relationship. And I think all of us know what it's like to go through a breakup, and I do really feel for her that her relationship has broken up, and I think we should give her that respect. But this is a SHARRI about the office of the Premier of New South Wales, and there is a certain standard of conduct and I believe she has breached that in a number of ways. I think this comes back to what she knew, and we know what she knew because we heard those telephone intercepts, and then what she didn't do. And she had an obligation to, a legal obligation to report that to the Independent Commission Against Corruption.
Look, just getting into the detail about what she might have done wrong, I want to start with the Ministerial Code of Conduct. In New South Wales, the Ministerial Code of Conduct does fall under the ICAC Act. That means that if you breach it, that is potentially a corruption offence. Do you think she has engaged in corrupt behaviour by breaching this Ministerial Code of Conduct, and how has she breached it?
Yeah, so I guess there are three main issues for me. You're right, the Ministerial Code of Conduct falls under the Independent Commission Against Corruption Act. I think the biggest issue here is around conflict of interest. You are required to declare a conflict of interest. Now, we know that you know, the Premier was the Transport Minister, Treasurer, and the Premier, the role she has now. But she sat around the cabinet table. She's been involved intimately in decisions around the Aerotropolis, around BADGERYS Creek, and then she also has Daryl Maguire, who's talking to her about the $1.5 million that he stands to make to clear his debts, which allows them to have a relationship together after politics. So I think at the very least she should have disclosed that. Now, for me, the moment she should have disclosed that was in July 2018, and you'll know, SHARRI, of course, that in July 2018 Daryl Maguire appeared before ICAC, the inquiry into Canterbury Council, and that's when his misdeeds and misconduct were fully exposed. The Premier had the perfect opportunity then to say, I have a conflict of interest, I am in a relationship with Daryl Maguire, and instead she didn't do that. Instead she kept it secret, and that continued for another 2 years. But at that particular point she also had a responsibility under the ICAC Act, separate from the Ministerial Code of Conduct. She had a responsibility then to actually go to ICAC and report what she knew.
She says legally that it wasn't an intimate relationship because their finances were separate, they weren't living together. So this is the argument, the technical argument she's using to say that her relationship did not have sufficient status to disclose at that cabinet table you were referring to when she was making decisions that her partner or her the person she was in a close personal relationship with stood to benefit from financially. Does this argument, in your view, hold up under scrutiny when it's the Premier of the state who's making it?
Yeah, look, I think you've just settled on what the crux of this is, to be honest. So the Premier says it was a close personal relationship and it wasn't sufficient status to disclose to her colleagues or her friends. But of course, this morning in the newspaper we've heard, there was an interview obviously in the Daily Telegraph where she said that you know, they were planning on marrying and she was very much in love with him. Now, I actually feel really uncomfortable even talking about these issues because I think there's a level of respect here that you have to give someone, whether they're the Premier or not. But it is in many ways different when you are the Premier, because when you are the Premier, you have a legal obligation to disclose that, and she didn't do it. She should have said to her colleagues, I'm in a relationship with Daryl Maguire back in 2018, and she didn't do it. So, you know, there are a lot of semantics at the moment about, you know, sufficient status, close personal relationship, or, you know, intimate relationship. I think that the Premier has actually chosen her words very, very carefully, and I think we've seen that played out. But I have to say, I was shocked when I saw the front page of the Daily Telegraph this morning, where the Premier, who said that this is a deeply personal issue, has in fact done an interview with a gossip columnist, and of course it's all over the front page of the paper, and in that it's obviously a very significant relationship.
Well, just moving to that front page today of the Sunday Telegraph, do you think the fact that she didn't choose a political journalist to do this interview with shows that she was trying once again to avoid scrutiny and to spin her way out of this?
Well, you know, I think it's really interesting, SHARRI, because and Andrew Clennell has been terrific in this, I have to say. He really did show up the political gallery in New South Wales this week, because he asked the hard questions. I think most journalists are where I'm at, but I do think that, you know, the public has still got to get there, because many in the public don't understand the real details of this and her legal requirements. And I guess it's up to me and others to talk about what is required of the office of the Premier. But yes, I have to say I was quite shocked that that was the choice that she made today. And again, you know, I will say I believe her relationship in any normal circumstance is very, very private. But, you know, this is about the conduct of the office of the Premier.
Yeah, and of course, none of us have made the decision to talk about it. ICAC chose to disclose her relationship. Look, one of the things that struck me this week is that when, from the moment that Gladys Berejiklian became Premier, she said she was only going to uphold the highest standards of integrity in her cabinet. And when any of her ministers have even been named in a corruption hearing, they have had to stand aside while the investigation is carried out. She hasn't held herself to the same standard, though.
Yeah, and I think this is the hypocrisy of it all, to be honest. And I have tried. Look, let me say to you, SHARRI, I know that there are a lot of people who aren't on the same page as me on this in the community. There are many people who think she's worked very, very hard. And, you know, I have, unlike many opposition leaders, I've come up and I've actually praised her, and I've said when she's done a good job. And I've also admitted that this is a personal relationship and she deserves for that not to be discussed openly. But it is the office of the Premier. And, you know, I have felt really let down this week, I think, because even though she's my opponent, I still respect her, and I've respected her integrity. I mean, I've fought corruption. She's always stood for something I believed was right and proper, and that this week it's all just come crumbling down. And it's not, I think for me as well, it's not just the facts that have emerged, it's the way she's tried to twist those facts to suit her own narrative, which her narrative is obviously to have to avoid reporting this or owning up to any wrongdoing. The fact is that she knew about Daryl Maguire's business dealings, we know, because she was told, and she had a legal obligation to report that, and she did not. And we know this, SHARRI, because back in July 2018, and I keep coming back to that, that is a crucial date. That is when his misconduct is exposed. All these telephone conversations date before that. So when she was told that Daryl Maguire had behaved incorrectly, she already knew it. She already had all the information. She knew of his wheeling and dealing. She knew of Country Gardens. She knew he was trying to do the deals with private investors from China. She knew it, and she didn't disclose it. She should have said to the Independent Commission Against Corruption, I know much more than what you know, and I need to come forward and disclose it. It's what I did. When I reported my corruption, I went back and I pulled my letter out the other day that I sent to the Independent Commission Against Corruption, and in it I say, these are a series of events that I believe have happened. I have a feeling something is not right. I don't know anyone who've benefited financially, but I have a duty to disclose it.
Just remind me what that related to. Just remind me and remind viewers what that related to.
Yeah, so this was when I went to ICAC in 2011. The hearing was in 2014 against Nathan Tinkler. I exposed the corruption there. There were 13 Liberal MPs, Joe Tripodi and others within my own party. But it was a decision I made to disclose, and I went back into politics because I believed it has to be better. And I despair that if we accept this, we accept impossibly low standards of conduct.
Okay. Look, just finally, because we are running out of time, I've got to go. You know, the Premier has used this unlucky in love excuse of, you know, poor woman, unmarried, unlucky in love. Do you think this is offensive from a female perspective that she has used this excuse to try and evade the questions about whether she, you know, checked that Daryl Maguire had made the appropriate disclosures, or whether she herself had complied with the Ministerial Code of Conduct?
Yeah, I guess the question is, would we accept this excuse from a male Premier? I wouldn't.
Fair enough. Jodi, McKay, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.